What is in the consciousness now of buildings, and especially an importance placed on government funding, those sorts of things, is how the building, like we said, performs. So it's got more than anything, it's got to do with building efficiency. So if the building is able to maintain its heating and cooling costs, that's glazing, that's cladding, that's air handling, that's everything. The roof is a massive part of that as well. There's levels now that we need to hit, especially with Alberta infrastructure projects. Without a shell that is going to help retain all the work that all the air handling units and all those sorts of things are doing, it's not going to work.
That's Luke Toller. Luke works for IMARK Architectural Metals. He's this episode's guest here on the InfraSound podcast. IMARK is a local infrastructure success story. Luke talked to us about, and taught us a lot about, cladding.
Yes, the face of a building. It's more than skin deep, believe it or not. It is the durable exterior that makes it weather resistant, that makes it suited to the environment, and just that gives a good impression when you show up to a building and you just take it in from a distance.
We started the conversation by talking about the company's most current project, which is the River Cree Medical Centre.
Left me in a state of awe. We hope that it does for you as well.
Enjoy the episode. The River Cree Medical Centre is a remarkable building. Can you tell our listeners and viewers what they see when they look at the River Cree Medical Centre?
You see basically this panoramic image that kind of stretches about 180 feet on either side of the main focal point of the building. It's one photograph across 180 panels. What you're being shown is an image that is strongly tied to the past in the area and the people. You're seeing beadwork that's celebrated, colors that are important to the people of Enoch, and you're seeing it done in a way that's aesthetically pleasing. It's a new, modern look that not only is celebrating the past, but is also demonstrating the importance of what's been done there and what's to come. The back of the building is metal cladding, so more of a traditional practice, but alternating colors, and it's a Baroque form metal cladding that's horizontal application and runs from basically the ground up with some interesting angles, bottom angles, which is always fun for people like us that have to cut every one of those sheets, but that's okay. The aesthetic is very interesting on the back, even for the backside of a building.
That's what the untrained eye sees. What does the trained eye see?
They see an incredibly high level of difficulty. I think the ability to achieve what we're looking at there, it's something that's interesting and engaging when you look at it. And then the technical aspect of it there is that it takes a tremendous amount of work both before the job starts and then while the job's happening, and then even to finish everything from the last screw, the last rivet that goes into the wall. It takes an army of expertise to get you to that point.
Well, and I think that comes out when you look at the building, to actually see a photograph permanently etched into the exterior cladding. How is it made into the building? Is it like a laser etching, or like what went into that photograph? The
process really starts with this specifically where there's an image that, and I couldn't tell if it was the client or if it was actually the architect that wanted to place this image on the building. But originally what it started off was somewhat of a more basic pattern. The beadwork that you see on the building is predominantly what the facade was going to be. So it was something patternized that was textile and relatively easy to print. But then they decided that they wanted to try and have something a little bit more personal and then a little bit more unique. So that's where the photo came from. So the first step to ensuring that could be done was to see if the image quality was high enough. So when you actually look at each individual panel up close, if you were to have it in your hands, it would look like a blob. Mm-hmm. There's really not a lot of detail and context, but when you're 30, 40 feet away, the entirety of the image is what actually shows what's there. So basically what happens is the photo comes in. Yes, we have enough clarity in the image to actually place this on the size of facade that we're looking to do. So initially when we get that in, internally our estimating team takes the idea, takes the design, and tries to find the most efficient way to build it. That's the competitive part of the industry, is everyone is trying to build the same thing, but who can build it the fastest, the most efficient. And then at the end of the day, what wins us the project is the most cost effective. The next step into that was starting with approvals and all those sorts of things. And the client comes and says, we'd actually like to try and do this. Could you give us a price to do this? Says, okay. And then this is one of the parts where I think Enoch deserves a ton of credit, is that they knew what they wanted. They were very firm about what they wanted, but they were absolutely understanding of what that cost was. Then the fun part starts, where you need to lay that image over, slide and place it within the elements that fit with the building, trying to avoid windows so you see more of the TPs and the people. Once that's done, we need to basically grid out the panels, which is the more structural and kind of technical part of what we're gonna do on the facade. So that all the reveal lines, so the lines that are in between all the panels that you see, those are generally tied to certain things, coming off the top of a window or off the bottom of a window, or how they line up with the brick. Those sort of things are usually common practice for what we do, especially in sort of panelized settings, is that you look to try and have the reveals be an aesthetic part of it. Mm-hmm. Now, in this particular instance, it's almost tertiary, but the way that affects it is that the image has to be laid on, and because each panel is unique, there's not one panel that can go in a different spot or that can be used in a different setting. It has to go there. So when they came with the image, it was presented to us. We took it and basically had to give it to then our manufacturer to ensure that there was enough quality in the image that they could stretch that and put that over the entire facade. Once that was approved, they said, yes, you have that quality. That's great. Then we basically pull that image into what was already a sort of a pre-laid out grid of what the panels are. A lot of the time that's driven by the material size. This particular product, there's about 2 different sizes that we can actually put the individual customized image onto. So once that's determined, we have that layout done with reference to window lines and brick lines and all those sorts of things to try and make just the grid aesthetically pleasing. Then we place the image on it, slide the image across the elevation to determine where we want it to sit. That becomes then the process of, okay, we have the image. That goes to Austria, which is where the manufacturer is. They run through and they program it all, and they say, this is how many panels of this size you need. This is how many panels of this size you need. And they give us an entire list. So each panel comes back to us with its own tag and its own image, its own layout, because it's one for one. There's one panel, there's one copy, there's one place for it.
And then showtime, installation.
And then showtime. Yeah. So there's a little bit of fabrication time we have in-house, where we'd have the option to put these panels onto our CNC and have them drilled. That was our initial plan when we actually made the order. By the time they got over here, we'd gone through so many iterations of where the fastening points were going to be. So you probably can't really see it on the facade, but they're all exposed fasteners. You will be able to pick them out in spots. So basically, we put them onto the machine. Our CNC would then drill all the holes. So we decided the amount of variation, and when you look at the facade, you'll see it between the angles and lines of the windows and the brick. There's really not a lot of square lines to follow that drive a lot of our fastening points. So we made the decision that we were going to drill them all in the field.
The windows are not, for people who haven't seen them, they may be picturing conventionally shaped windows when you're talking about the windows. These are not conventionally shaped windows.
They're not. No, there's not a lot of right angles. There's not a lot of parallel lines. I mean, but the aesthetic of that is beautiful. Definitely ups the difficulty for us as far as being able to cut into those lines. And, you know, we're talking about the grid of panels that is square lines vertically and horizontally, and as they intersect with non-square lines as far as how they relate to the panel grid, we end up with some very small intricate triangles or cut out of the bottoms. It is funky. Yeah.
The shape of the windows is really interesting. Does that influence how light enters the building and how people experience it on the inside? Or
I think the interior part of the building is interesting because a lot of that is driven by what's required for the tenant space, which is essentially medical or surgical suites. A bit, I think there is having, you know, I mean, you look at the building here and all your window jambs and sills are all straight up and down and square in a very typical setting. So to see something that is on an angle or on a slope, I think right away that kind of puts you in a space that this is unique, right? And I think from the outside in, you get that sense all the way through the building.
When architects specify metal cladding for a project, what are they usually trying to achieve? Is it performance, aesthetics, or both?
I'd say both, right? You're getting a product that is durable. It lasts a long time. and can provide an aesthetic that's higher end. It can provide an aesthetic that's rugged. They are doing both. When they have the budget to have it in there, they're doing both. It's there absolutely is a premier amount of function in what we do. I think, beyond what you see at the end of the day, there's the function of an envelope system that is important to have. So knowing what you want to get to on the outside and knowing what your building needs to do performatively, we affect a fairly good chunk of that. I mean, if we're talking about, energy consciousness, there's a lot that is M&E and that kind of thing where we don't have that much effect. But at the end of the day, if the building is better insulated or sealed more properly, that sorts of thing, those are all things that fall within our scope.
What does a building do?
It breathes, it sweats, it loses heat, it retains heat. So much of what is in the consciousness now of buildings, and especially an importance placed on government funding, those sorts of things, is how the building, like we said, performs. So it's got more than anything, it's got to do with building efficiency. So if the building is able to maintain its heating and cooling costs, that's glazing, that's cladding, that's air handling, that's everything. The roof is a massive part of that as well. Those elements are really, there's levels now that we need to hit, especially with Alberta infrastructure projects, larger projects like that. There's a tremendous amount put onto energy consciousness and LEED programs and LEED points. There's a scoring system you have to hit now, right? So again, we're relatively small in achieving those points, but without a shell that is going to help retain all the work that all the air handling units and all those sorts of things are doing, it's not going to work.
So if the building is a body, and just hear me out on this one, I might be making a leap here, but is metal cladding Botox? Like, it helps with the aging process if you do it early enough. It has a very strong aesthetic quality. Maybe it does a couple functional things, like helps with headaches, like I feel like there's something here where...
One of my first bosses in the industry, he's an awesome guy. I grew up with his son, and he'd say, look, the building, the cladding is the jewelry of the building. We're putting on the jewelry. So not quite the same comparison, but very close. And I would say that, yeah, the aesthetic is it is that zhuzh on the building. It's the cool thing. It's the catchy thing. It can be. It can also be what makes you not like a building or the look of a building, right? So I think that there's a shift lately to sort of want to have that Botox or that step up in the aesthetic. But, to answer or to kind of dig into the question a little bit more, if I was to say cladding or the cladding scope is the skin. So beyond what is visual, there's performative metric there, and that's kind of what the whole envelope system is, right? There's a performance beyond what you see that is vital.
So on my drive, home at the end of the day, I pass a lot of warehouses and stuff. And there is a very big difference from something that is just kind of a square box with a bunch of loading bays to something where like the extra 5% went in and they made it something special. And usually it's the cladding.
I think the opportunity there is, and I mean, you see it a lot of kind of in those warehouse settings where they'll focus on a entry, or they'll focus on maybe certain elements along a road or something like that. But the ability to change your perspective on a building can change by adding in these elements. And I think that people are engaged not only in their surroundings a little bit more now, but I think there was maybe a bit of, and growing up here, I think there was a tendencies that Edmonton kind of got a bad reputation for maybe being a place that was drab or boring, and there was a lot of function, but it wasn't.
We have to
the
be
nicest.
hardy, right? Like we have the winters, and so it's the function more so than the aesthetic quality. But this kind of really bridges the two. I love that.
Growing up here, I think there was maybe a bit of a chip on our shoulders about our city. And it's not necessarily we couldn't put a finger on it, but I think that, whether or not we agreed with what was said, that has motivated us. And I think we are a hardworking city, motivated us to change that because we didn't like that. All of that is I think, based in pride in we don't feel that outside assessment of us is correct. And I think it's been a long road, but
Right.
I think there's a lot of work, and it's almost feels like just the crest of the wave of how much is changing.
How do like winds and thermal expansion play into the system design for you?
When you're talking about metal cladding, especially, like all cladding will expand. It moves. So there's a fluidity to it, and then I think especially we have a fun range of temperature here.
So fun.
Yeah, so fun. So we see a large sway that the exterior has to endure to be a part of that, right? So there's allowances put into the design, but also the products that we're putting on the wall to allow for those expansions and contractions that you see seasonally. But even performatively with the envelope system as well, I think that we talked about trying to maintain that internal temperature is basically the main concern. But if you have a system that is able to give you more allowance for a stable interior temperature, a stable interior environment, that's the full system. That's the full build.
While we hear from outside the equipment making short work of 107th Street as the Valley Line West is being constructed, I want to talk about tools. What machines do you use?
Things started out with like a 10-foot press brake, which you're making girts and flashings and things like that. I mean, you walk into our office today, and the big focus on machinery and fabrication is in our fab floor, where there's 2 CNC routers, there's a laser, there's a CNC punch, and then a welding bay, and there's probably 7 or 8 brakes that are now far more digitized than they ever were. The technology aspect, just in the mechanical portion, the fabrication portion of what we do is vastly different than it was 30 years ago. And I think even if you take a step further back from that, in the programming or design phase, there's a tremendous amount of horsepower required to get things to the point where we can actually fabricate them. That's in a programming phase, in a CAD phase. Our drafting team is incredibly skilled in what they do so that we can actually give good instruction to our fabrication team and good design and things that make sense and are actually practical. Without that ability to really have not only the people that understand the technology, but the technology itself, I think we wouldn't see anything close to what we see now.
I like watching the YouTubes of like the CNCs doing their thing, but that really was a huge technological leap for your industry specifically.
It takes the imaginary, or it takes the vision, and it actually is that leap between something that somebody sees in their mind or can draw, putting it into a digital space. That portion there is what's really unlocked the customization of what you can see on facades now, or even not necessarily just facades, even some of the installations or structures or things like that, art pieces that you see. At some point, it was taking it from being able to draft or design that by hand. Doing that in digital space allows then the machinery to be a part of that. And that's where efficiency and cost starts to come down, because you're actually able to mechanize a lot of these processes.
So do you have a lot of projects where, 90% of the work done by a person is kind of in the design file, and then the actual execution, like the physically making of the thing, is automated? Kind of, where is the balance with that at this time?
I think you're still pretty equitable. Maybe not in volume of time, but I think, in resource spent, like I think the digital space is a heavy portion of it, but the skill maybe now is what's reduced. The fact that they're able to get through these things much quicker really lends itself to, when it gets to fabrication, they're able to have a better, more efficient plan. But that being said, a lot of what we see, so it's maybe a little bit biased, some of the weird or funky things that we do in the shop still take a tremendous amount of time and skill to do that, right? So the machines are able to actually cut and produce a lot of parts, and then it's our guys in the field or in the shop that are assembling a lot of those parts. And that still is, I don't think that's going away, right?
Do you guys use laser welders? I recently learned about these. I'm very excited.
Really?
I'm just curious.
No, we're still all welded by hand.
Amazing. Can you share a project where the cladding fundamentally changed how the building was perceived?
If you look at some of the Edmonton supportive housing buildings, we've done some of those, and a lot of what is done on those is their focus is on trying to get things done very quickly and efficiently and cost effectively, but also to be a spot in the community that isn't necessarily an eyesore or something that people, again, can be proud to be around. We had a few elements on those buildings. We called them their pipe screens. So they're alternating size of pipe and different colors, beautiful colors, crazy colors, all sorts of different things. And it really, what it did was take what maybe I think some people had a negative connotation towards, and it added an element that made it a bright spot in the community, or made it a visually appealing or cool or interesting part. So I think that what it can do is take you from a space where maybe there is some apprehension from the community members or people around about what that means. But if it's visually appealing, at least they feel good about the structure being there. And they really are a focal point of the building, a kind of an element or an architectural feature that doesn't necessarily have to be there. They do serve a function as an actual guardrail for the balconies, but beyond being functional, it's an interesting and it's a beautiful aesthetic that, again, drives that pride back into the community and the project.
I've heard someone said one time, I really liked it, that dressing well is self-esteem in motion. Some buildings are an eyesore. They're not fun to look at.
Do you like looking at the Norquest building that's out
I
our
love
window
the
right now?
aesthetic. I don't like that we didn't do it. But I mean, there's a good example of, the panel joints on this building. It would have been very easy for them to just do squares that were the maximum optimization for the material, so you had the least amount of waste, and just cookie cutter them in, place your windows in symmetrical spots. They didn't do that, right? They let this building have the freedom to be unique and interesting and different. That's someone dressing well. It's that building that's that Norquest feeling good about themselves.
And their students.
Totally.
Who are as unique as the building.
Exactly. So the people that are interacting with that building, I think you feel differently walking into a space like that than a space that's maybe drab or boring or run down or whatever it is. Or maybe just even, the word institutional is probably changing because of things like this, but that cold institutionalized feeling, I think, can go away. I think these are modern and cool and interesting and beautiful.
What's the Gucci equivalent of a metal cladded building? What's the guy dressed head to toe?
I think you're looking at something that probably has something panelized. So something like this where you have aluminum composite, you have phenolic panel, maybe some custom imagery or custom architecture features. If you have somebody who's dedicated to the end product that wants to be part of a holistic team, that's when you get those, because you have room to have these beautiful things, or you have an architect that has a design and with all these cool, fun, interesting features. But if they get it to a point where it's not constructible or it's not affordable, then you lose out on those opportunities, right?
What accounts for the growth in interest in an, budget for architectural cladding on buildings, namely public buildings? Schools are no longer being ignored. Schools built now are not the schools that I went to.
Yes, schools are beautiful now. You're seeing this change because there is funding for it, which helps, I think, for sure. But I also think kind of back to what we talked about, where communities and the people who are using these buildings want to be prideful and they want to enjoy the space that they're going into. They want to feel good about where they're going every day. I think that the visual of the exterior of those buildings, when you're walking up to work in the morning, when you're walking into school in the morning, that changes it. And I would be very interested to see kind of what the connection is between performance-based metrics, or, students performing well, teachers performing well, not just isolated to education, but whoever's using the building, is their performance enhanced by enjoying the space that they're in? Like the office that we're in now. This is a great space to be in. You guys probably enjoy being in here because because it's not a space that you feel cooped up and you don't feel like you're walking into prison every day, right? As you're allocating budget, I think that you want to fulfill that budget and make sure that we talked about performance of the building, that it's able to perform, but then you're also having a space that's beautiful because of all the other benefits we just spoke of.
How did you get started? You took shop in high school? You did well.
I did a little.
Where'd you go to high school?
McNally.
What's the team name? Go Tigers.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, good job. That's good.
Very impressive.
I played a rugby game in my final year of high school, and my best friend's dad, who I spoke about earlier, Jean, was at the game, and he walked up to me after and said, if you want a job, you can have a job, because if you're crazy enough to do what you did out there, then I'd like to see what you do for money. Was essentially his messaging. So I the year right after high school, I was in the trades with them, and we were cladding, and it was great. I wanted to be doing something with my hands. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be tactily pushing and doing something.
Do you see your job as a creative outlet, or is it more problem solving?
Problem solving. That's sort of what it's morphed into. I think even in the field, a lot of it is problem solving. The creativity to me, though, is not absent from what we do. I think the creativity is primarily in estimating and drafting for us. In estimating, it's almost budget creativity, but then also they need to have freedom to try and take the product that the architect wants to have and get it to a point where A, it's constructible, and then B, it's also cost effective for them to have it on the building. And it doesn't necessarily feel artistic, but it's absolutely creative. And then the drafting team, same thing. That creativity or ingenuity of how it's going to be constructed is paramount in what we do.
How was the company started?
About 31 years ago. We had our 30th anniversary last year. Founded by our two owners who are still part of the company. It's Barry Clark and Ted Sims. So IMARK came from the IM and Sims, and the ARC from Clark. Started off in a smaller shop in northwest Edmonton, and it's awesome to still have both of them a big part of what we do. And as it's grown, I think they've done an amazing job of still making it feel like a family in a small company.
A lot of what you're talking about is metal cladding specific to building and exteriors, things like that. As a standalone product, I know it's not specific to just buildings. Maybe walk us through a couple projects where it's separate from an actual architectural entity, or it's its own thing.
I would say, half the handrails in Sherwood Park seem to be coming through our shop. Helen Nolan Park would be a spot where, again, fun feature or look, and again, that's more of a structural element. Horlack Park, all the handrails that are at Horlack Park, the new wonderful Horlack Park, that came through our fab shop. Stanley Cup at United Cycle, that was us. The new Blatchford development, somebody wanted to have, I think they only had the propeller from an old plane, so they wanted us to build a turbine to have it in the center of a traffic circle.
Can we talk about some of the other projects where you've left your IMARK on the city?
Yeah, you bet.
Starting with my all-time favorite, Simon's at Londonderry Mall.
That's one of our programs that we call Ocular. So this one isn't a particular image that we've done with perforations, but it's our CNC punch machine that takes that flat stock. They have different sizes of tools. They're like dies basically, and they actually come through and stamp the material. That one's a very interesting aesthetic. Backlighting too.
The St. Anne Street Historical Decorative Guardrail.
I don't even know if I'd be able to picture that one personally.
Terwilliger Park Footbridge.
That was fun. That was, we did a couple of those little podiums or roofs.
Castle Downs Park Pavilion.
Those are stainless steel panels that we used a customized cleat system to install those. We found out how many drill bits it was going to take using stainless steel. It's very strong material.
The Rogers Place corner panel.
Mm-hmm. Those were supply only panels for us. So some of what we do is we get orders from other companies and we provide that to them. But always fun to be a part of sort of a main focal point of the city. The
Edmonton Cambridge LRT Pedway Tunnel.
Initially, it was a punch stainless panel. That's that same machine, the CNC punch. Took basically an older map, a hybrid map image of Edmonton, applied it across the panels with the River Valley going through it.
The HSBC office tower retrofit and parking garage perforated metal facade. Did I get that right?
That was another one that I was on site for. The parking garage was an old, wasn't split face concrete, but it was multi-depth I think that I don't even know if they were precast or cast in place, but basically we had to put on extremely heavy gauge bar and then plumb the wall, and then we hung perforated panel on that. That part was very, very busy, and being in downtown, as you can hear, is always busy.
Thank you, Fire Station number 2, for your public service.
You never knew what the building was going to do next.
Ah.
So it took a lot of surveying and planning to make sure that building was true and plumb. It happens a lot with retrofits where you really can't control what's there, or there's no one to go and talk to about it afterwards. This is what you need to deal with.
There are many more, but the Centennial Plaza metal flowers and ocular fence.
The ocular panels, was another supply for us. But again, ran through our CNC punch. We had some of that material actually run through our CNC routers as well to kind of bend all the returns, the panel returns on those. One of our team members I'll highlight on this one, Jesse, was incredibly involved in this and did a massive amount of work. The flower structures were our fab team. Another one of those, hey, we would like something that looks cool like this. Can you build it? Yes, we can. This is how we're going to do it.
Thank you for being with us today. Can we go take a look at the River Cree Medical Centre?
Yeah, I'd love to go out there with you guys, for sure.
Okay, so we're on the site, and what an image that comes together. This is the ideal spot to kind of stand and take it all in.
Yeah, I think this is probably the distance where you get full clarity, and you also get a bit of sense of size and scope. A bit of masonry as well, and then there are bands of the beadwork where we have bands on either side of the entries and then the columns, but then as you transition to the outsides, they have glazing as well. So there was a bit of a process going back and forth between matching across mediums, which is always difficult, and then also getting the colors right. It's unique. You don't see a lot of buildings that have different lines like this. I think it's easier to kind of fall into something where it's square and straight lines, but this, from go, every line on the building is interesting. Now
that we're super close to the panels, they're so much bigger than I would imagine. You said meters. I hear that, but to conceptualize it, you really have to come up close and see how large in scale they are. Like this, it's amazing that this comes together. It feels almost a bit daunting to look at what the end product's supposed to look like, and then what you get to start with is sort of, it makes the road feel long when you first start, but it's piece by piece comes together. And so this gap, this is accommodating for weather and probably part of the design itself as well? So the product itself actually does need to have a certain amount of airflow behind it. If there isn't and some moisture gets trapped in there, it will warp. So yeah, you do need a gap in there for airflow and just a certain amount of breathability for the product. These are a little more standard. Correct, yeah. So all the beadwork panels, the large format and the smaller format, actually we were able to get, on the full size, we were able to get 4 of these per sheet that we would have came, and then we would have cut those ourselves. Okay. So there would have been eight basically images on all these, and then on these ones as well over here, these were only single panels. So just because of the size that they wanted on the pattern, we were only able to get 1 pattern per panel on the large format. The orange specifically was the color in the beadwork that was difficult to get the right orange, and then also to match the glazing. I mean, the design of the building, it has a function. You're supposed to go there, you're supposed to use the businesses, but you arrive here and your eye just kind of, it draws you to the building, it attracts you, and then even just the way the design elements all come together, like the angled glass panels coming down and then the beadwork kind of guides you along. It's kind of like a go this way path. Yeah, it definitely feels like a welcoming sort of entrance to the building. Even kind of the arms stretched out wide feels very much like a hug coming in, right? So. Okay, how many window shapes are there? Do you know? I don't. A lot of what drove the shape, spacing, and size of the windows is what the requirements were for the interior. Okay. This wing specifically is where the surgical suites are, so they're quite restricted on what they can and cannot do. Okay. But again, it's one of those things where you don't know that because it still fits what the overall aesthetic of the building is, right? It doesn't stand out that they were, being driven to a certain specific set of standards that came from the inside. No, it looks like creative license drove it, but it's actually accommodating the internal requirements. So you can see all the small circles that are on the outside. Those are all rivets. So basically they go through the panel. The panels are pre-drilled. They're a little bit larger, the holes, than the actual rivet themselves.
to allow for some movement. Every panel on here though will have a fixed point rivet. The idea is that the panel can move off of that point everywhere, but you can't have more than one fixed point because it then won't move properly. On the wall here, there's 3 different colors of rivets only, which I was incredibly nervous about when we first did it. But there's sort of a black, a gray, and then up higher there's some whites.
It didn't occur to me they would be different colors. Of course they would be different colors. That's a good detail.
Yeah, I was quite nervous that it wouldn't blend.
Yeah.
So we got lucky.
What did you learn from this project?
I think for me specifically, would have been that the volume of work you can put in up front or before we even get to site really, made a big difference on something that's as complicated as this. Again, that doesn't take away from what our guys are able to do, but the plan and process, when it's methodical and you have a team that is invested in it, you can really achieve something that's quite cool.
So we've seen the jewelry of the building, the superficial, thing that everyone's attracted to, but there's more underneath. Talk about the personality that this all brings together.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what we do, is that, the envelope system, the membrane and the insulation keep that environment stable, keep that environment secure, which, in any building is important, but I think especially when you're talking about a medical center. It allows the system to function in balance. Now, we can kind of see on the top of the building there's large mechanical screens that have big M&E units up there that take care of the environment of the building. But the envelope functions to be that protective layer to keep things at the same rate. You could have the most expensive equipment on the top of your roof, but if the outer skin or the envelope, whatever element that is protecting and maintaining your environment is not stable, that's where it becomes a bit of a problem, right? Without that, it doesn't really matter if the building looks good. If it doesn't function properly, it's not going to serve its purpose.
Well, that's great. It's beautiful, it's functional, it does its job in a way that I wish we can see this on more buildings. Well, thank you for the walking tour. I think this adds so much.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. I was glad to get out, and it's always fun to show off the good work.